Welcome to the Sherdog Radio Network recap for UFC Fight Night 255, Edwards versus Brady, also known as UFC London. I'm your host, Ben Duffy of Sherdog.com. In place of Mr. Keith Schillen, who is not available this afternoon, we have Mr. Adam Duffy, a multiple-time former co-host of the show, one of my favorite people to do these shows with. Because I don't talk to him enough during the week. Adam, how you doing on this fine early evening on the East Coast where you live?
Doing wonderful. Yeah, finally got picked back up from JV. I'm on the field. It feels great to be back. Yeah, I mean, regardless of how the fights were tonight, which we had their highs and lows, something about like the weather finally turning here in Georgia and the sun still being out, watching them, just made it all better. So I'm doing great. No,
I totally agree, because obviously we're going to give this card a letter grade at the end of the show, and whatever letter grade I give it, it's a full letter higher than it would be if we were talking at 2 a.m.
Exactly.
Other nice thing about Euro card times is we have our Euro contingent out here. I got Mr. John Butterfield, Ms. Portia Baines, the biggest MMA fan, the biggest little MMA fan in Wales out there. What up, everybody? This is the recap for UFC London. Let's get right to it.
Yep.
As several people in the chat have already made clear, it was not a great night of picks for Schillen and Duffy. Keith has a much more even keel about this. Generally speaking, if I made a great pick, I'm happy to go out there and claim it. If I made some lousy picks, I am happy to go out and take my lumps for those as well. I'm going to take my lumps here because this is an unpredictable sport, obviously. I mean, you go by the money lines, even the bookmakers whose job it is to pick these fights, the money line only gets it right about 2/3 of the time. So it's an unpredictable sport, but when I get a pick wrong that should have been obvious beforehand, I do feel like I need to take my medicine. And I have been slow coming around on Sean Brady because leading into his fight with Gilbert Burns, the word on Brady was still win or lose, his gas tank is the ceiling. Because, even though he was undefeated going into the Bilal Muhammad fight, but even in the fights where he won and was largely dominant, he slowed down late in the fight. It was just a result of being a super muscular guy with a super wrestling heavy style. And the thing I would point out about him is when he wrestles, even if he's winning, it seems like he's making himself tired at least as quick as the other guy. That's not the case anymore. He beat Gilbert Burns and he was fine. Like his gas was fine. And here I picked Edwards against Brady just because, you know what? I've seen Edwards in, at this point, a half dozen 5-round fights. He hasn't won all of them, but none of the ones he lost were because he was more tired. And so I thought, okay, even if Brady wins the first 2 rounds, I think he's going to slow down, give me Edwards to find a way to win this thing. That's not the case. This was a steamrolling.
Yeah.
I mean, we had not seen this done to Leon Edwards before. Even the first Usman fight where, he was desperately dead behind before he head kicked the man. It didn't look like this. Like, Edwards was losing the rounds. Usman was out wrestling him, but it wasn't like this. I mean, talk to me a minute about this fight.
Dude, yeah, like I didn't go in on my picks just as much as you or Keith did because I got called on the show late. And so, but yeah, I mean, I agreed with everything you had said about this main event, saying, it all really stemmed from, I don't know if I was on the show for this one, but I distinctly remember the Michael Chiesa fight between him and Brady and thinking like, okay, he won pretty much every second of that fight. But like, man, if that had gone on 2 more minutes, he might've had a heart attack. It just seemed like, his gas tank was just not there. And it's because he's built like a brick shithouse, like a graffitied brick shithouse. And so looking, at this fight, I saw it the same way you do. Like, Leon, he can sometimes struggle to get, up to a higher gear, but at the very least, he's consistently keeping up a pace throughout a fight. And I figured even if, the first 2 rounds, Brady muscled him around, then, he's going to gas out. But that is not what happened. I mean, wow, I did not expect. One big thing that stuck out to me in the first round was actually the improvements in Sean Brady's stand up. I mean, a lot of their exchanges, before the first takedown was sunk, was eye opening. I mean, Leon, the commentary team was saying that it was kind of a fast start for Leon, and I think that was because Brady forced that out of him. I mean, Brady came straight at him from Jump Street, and I think that forced Leon to actually pick up the pace a little bit. And so in those exchanges, Leon was able to have some success, catching Brady on the way in. But it was a far cry from any of Brady's last performances. I mean, going from the guy who got, TKO'd against the fence by Bilal Muhammad to, kind of, going tit for tat with Leon Edwards. And then the takedowns, I mean, they were effortless and effective. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot I could say, but first impressions, fantastic improvements in Brady's game, fantastic performance, and just wow.
Okay, agreed on all points there. One thing I kind of threw out there before handing you the mic is we had not seen this done to Leon Edwards before.
Mm-hmm.
The guy is, I'm not looking at his Fight Finder profile right now, but I think he's like 32 or 33, which for welterweight is more or less prime, like, maybe the tail end of the bell-shaped curve, but generally speaking, unless they're my homie Alex Morono, the wheels aren't falling off at age 33. Is this a bad night at the office for Leon Edwards? Is it just a sign that Brady has taken it to another level, or are we seeing the beginning of a decline here? And you guys in the comments, let me know what you think too.
Yeah,
like, is this a great night for Sean Brady, a bad night for Leon Edwards, or have we already seen the best of Edwards and he's done as a factor in the title picture? Let us know what you think.
Yeah, and I think yes to all of those questions to some degree. I think that I think Brady had a stellar performance. I think we can't take that away from him in the slightest. I think this is the best he's ever looked by a good margin. And with Leon, it's interesting. I mean, going into this fight, sort of what people were talking about and what I was kind of thinking in my head was what. He got kind of embarrassed by Bilal, and thinking, okay, he's fighting in front of his home crowd again. Maybe hopefully he'll actually kind of step up to the challenge, try to make something happen that he wasn't able to against a fairly similar opponent in Bilal Muhammad. But he didn't, and you're right. No one's ever done this to Leon before. It's hard to say exactly if that's all because of Brady. But I don't know if we'll know the Leon part until we see him in his next fight, which we'll talk about in a few minutes here. But yeah, I think I see Ayman report put changing the guard.
I think it's Ayman report. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I think there is a part of that where it's weird, and it kind of happened before, like with none of us really noticing. And I think that has to do with Leon's career trajectory, being the guy who silently snuck up to the title picture, snatched it in emphatic fashion, and then kind of, was able to pick up a defense against, a Colby Covington type. But maybe it is just his time's up. Maybe that's one of those things where he's starting to decline. And like I said, it's something that wasn't obvious because of probably his inactivity, maybe his fighting style, but this is what that could look like is him. Thank you, Ayman. Maybe this is what that looks like. Maybe this is what a Leon Edwards in decline looks like. It's, guys who maybe he would have been able to stuff some of those takedowns before, but perhaps not anymore.
And it is worth noting that, okay, even if we've seen Edwards' high watermark, like if Edwards, the cornerstone of his legacy in the sport is landing an all-timer of a head kick in a fight where he was otherwise getting tooled.
Mm-hmm.
Still, it's not like he's fallen completely off a cliff and he's just going to make a puff of dust at the bottom like a
right.
Road Runner and Coyote cartoon. Because what Brady just did, how many people are there in the welterweight division that could conceivably even try to follow that path to victory? There are about 3.
Mm-hmm.
There's Shavkat, Hamzat, Bilal, and apparently Brady. Like, so,
apparently Brady.
So
none.
Even if he's declining, Edwards may still be a top 5 welterweight right now. interestingly, people in the chat are already jumping all over what to do next
Yes,
with the guy.
yes, they are.
Kind of interesting. So let's give the people what they want.
Okay.
Our man Dev punishing me for not having him on this recap with me. Apparently wants to see Dustin Poirier attempt 14 guillotines against Leon.
Not a bad idea, Dev, and I am sorry that I took your spot, but only once in a blue moon do I do this. Yeah, I mean, Dustin Poirier, he's retiring in Louisiana in a few months. Don't know if Leon wants to come out to Lafayette for that, but yeah, there's with Leon, it's so interesting. It's really hard to say. I mean, just the fact that he lost to the number 5 guy, which I know was on short notice, and he was supposed to fight JDM, and that would have been more of like a 2 top contenders kind of thing. Not that it isn't now, but you look at the jump that Brady's going to make, and you see, okay, that's some guy relatively low in the relatively lower rankings making a relatively large jump up. And so you could follow that path again. And the names that pop into my head are Ian Gary again in London, maybe this time next year or sometime later this year. Joaquin Buckley, also just 2 guys who, both feel like they need their stepping stone to see if they're, top 3 material, title challenger material. And that's only if, those 2 don't get paired up themselves. Alternatively, what you can do if you want to keep them in the mix is, if JDM loses to Bilal, maybe you rebook that. But yes, and that is a great point, Dev. Yeah, MVP would be another great like London main event for Leon Edwards.
Yeah, you have 2 Londoners. Like the crowd would presumably be happy with any result. Is there anything? Is there any real reasonable case for anything to do with Brady right now other than the Muhammad versus JDM winner?
It's weird because up until about 30 minutes ago we were the zeitgeist was saying, yeah, we have JDM versus Bilal, but as soon as that's over, Shavkat's in there. Like Shavkat's like he's the shoe-in, he's the one forget what it's called when you're about to go bad. Yeah, like
you're gonna go bad.
Yeah, no, go bat, like go like up
bat.
to bat,
On
like
deck?
up to bat, on deck. Yeah,
On deck.
like up until 30 minutes ago, Shavkat was on deck. Everyone was like, okay, yeah, JDM has to get in there because Shavkat couldn't make the date, but Shavkat's in there right now. But now you look at it and you're like, well, Brady with his last few performances has a stronger case than Shavkat, but it also feels kind of weird to jump them. But I think ultimately, I think maybe Brady versus Muhammad too is what's in the cards. I mean, just to win in that emphatic of a fashion too. I mean, like we're looking at Shavkat's last fight. It was pretty nip and tuck decision, to use your phrase, Dad. Nip and tuck decision over Ian Gary. But yeah, I mean the performances make the matchups, and I think Brady deserves it.
All right, and let the record show, viewers, that of the 2 of us, he's the one that said zeitgeist. Okay, like we come by it honestly, like. Duffies don't use a short word when there's a long one that would do. Yeah. This was pretty much the perfect performance for Sean Brady, considering that his short-term goal is beat the guy in front of him. His middle-term goal is beat the guy in front of him in a way that would make people even want to see him fight Bilal Muhammad again. And him, if he had just gone out and, dropped Edwards and choked him out in 2 minutes, I would not be here lobbying for him to fight Bilal Muhammad maybe 6 months from now. But
I can see that.
This kind of goes to all the things that Muhammad exposed, really. Where Muhammad was not just winning the wrestling exchanges, but was doing so again while just doing it without breaking a sweat. Where just Brady was clearly like tense and just, burning his cardio. I've said this before, but cardio, it's not just about how big your gas tank is. It's also how your engine idles.
Yep.
And
it's a good one.
It's a white belt lesson that I learn on a weekly basis, where I'll be grappling with a more experienced guy and he'll just be totally relaxed and I'll just be tense because I'm not comfortable in the position. I don't know what he might do that might be effective. I don't know what I should be doing, at least not as well as I should. So I'm burning gas at idle while, I mean, he could be reading a book, just waiting for me to do something. Brady seems to be getting past that stage. And that was really the only serious flaw in his MMA game.
Yeah. It was the only ceiling he had. And like you said, it was the only ceiling he had. And if it seems like he's over that, then there's not much there's not much he couldn't do. I'd be really interested to see a Muhammad rematch, because if we look back at that fight, Brady put on the pressure early. I forget if it was I think it was a second round TKO. I feel like he put the pressure on. Thank you, Ninja Kitty. Put the pressure on in the first round, and it was one of those interesting things. And I do want to, I guess, throw this somewhat of a caveat out towards Brady's performance, even this the slightest bit ones. But in any fight, the person who's leading the dance is going to burn less of their gas tank. And historically with Brady, even when he has been leading the dance, he's still been burning his gas tank. But that's another thing to maybe think about, is that, since he was in control for such large portions of this fight, we still can maybe put a half erased asterisk next to that gas tank question. But yeah, a rematch with Bilal will be really interesting.
Or JDM. I mean, let's not crown Muhammad the successfully defending champ yet. Jack Della Maddalena is. I mean, they're fighting in 6-7 weeks. It's the second weekend in May, something like that.
I think what's interesting is that in my head, Bilal versus Brady too. That's I'm thinking about that. But I mean, if JDM somehow sneaks the title, man, I don't know. I feel like Brady. Maybe this is just recency bias from what I experienced 30 minutes ago, but Brady might fold JDM into his shorts. We'll have to see.
We'll see. JDM has made a very successful run out of constantly being a tougher out than everybody thinks he's going to be.
Very true. Very true.
I am going to have a lot of mea culpas on this show, but underestimating Jack Della Maddalena is something that I've definitely had beaten out of me. Shall we move on to the co-main?
Yeah, let's do it.
Co-main event. Legendary, underrated Polish power at age 42 steps back into the cage against, 32-year-old Kiwi kickboxer Carlos Ulberg, according to Juliana Pena, the best looking guy in the UFC. I've been saying that for years. Get your own lines, Pena. Okay. I mean, considering that this is two guys with serious knockout power, I feel like the fight, it simmered and sparked, and it, a death blow knockout by either guy at any point in the 15 minutes wouldn't have shocked me. But at the end of it, it didn't shock me at all that moment never came.
Yeah.
Ulberg is another guy, kind of like Brady, kind of like Edwards, that, job number one was to beat the guy in front of him. Job number two was to do it in a way that would make people want to see him challenge Magomed Ankalaev. So mission one accomplished. He won the fight.
Yes.
Mission two, do you want to see him against Magomed Ankalaev right now? In the chat, we'll talk about the fight, but let's jump straight to, would you get, how, as Keith
am
would
I
put
buying
it,
that?
As Keith would put it, how far down the speed dial does Sean Shelby have to go before he gets to Carlos Ulberg? If Magomed Ankalaev needs an opponent, say 4 months from now.
My gut tells me, because of that fight. Good. This is a good point, John Butterfield. And to your point about that fight, the power of the two, but not being surprised that neither of them, got flatline KO'd. I mean, when you have two guys who are as defensively sound in their own ways as those two, with both understanding the power that each of them holds, it's not shocking to see the fight go that way. But I mean, that performance doesn't get you naturally excited to see, Ulberg versus Ankalaev. At the same time,
nothing gets me excited to see Ankalaev. It's really about the other.
True, very true. But also we're unlike welterweight. We're kind of starved for options at light heavyweight. I mean, the title picture is kind of wild right now. I'm pretty sure they're going to try to book the rematch between Alex and Ank. And so there's a little bit of a flow chart of like, if A happens, then B, if B happens, then C, to go there. But yeah, it'll all depend on the title picture. I mean, in my head, if they book that Alex and Ank rematch, that could line up for Oldberg to slide in right after that, if that does happen somewhere around International Fight Week. But if, say, Alex wins and they book a trilogy for the end of the year, then that puts everything on hold for a while. And just like how some people are saying in the chat, like Bobby Boucher, I think an Oldberg versus either a Yuri or even a Jamal Hill, even though Jamal's coming off a loss, I think those two fights look very different from the Jan fight. I think the way those two fights, I think there'll be a lot more excitement there. And in winning that fight, he may accomplish that secondary goal of really, cementing himself, making people excited to see him in that title picture.
I'm kind of with you on that. And I threw John Butterfield's comment up here because he really elucidated what I wanted to say right off the bat. It's tough to look good against Jan Blachowicz. Just one, he's an incredibly skilled, experienced, and tough fighter. Two, he is super, super good at turning any fight he's into a Jan Blachowicz fight. Like there's a certain pace that he fights at. There's a certain range that he fights at, and very, very good fighters that are extremely skilled, fighters that are younger than him, more athletic, maybe that have an even broader skill set, get pulled into Jan Blachowicz fights. Yep. And on top of everything else, for a guy who just seems so bluff and pleasant, he seems absolutely miserable to fight against. Like, you watch like an old school kung fu movie and some dude in a Shaolin monastery is training by like kicking a fucking tree or a telephone pole or something. Yeah. That is how you should have to train to fight Jan Blachowicz. Like the guy, he intentionally and willingly goes shin on shin more than any other fighter in MMA history. I'm surprised that he can get through like airport metal detectors with his legs. Like how?
He probably sinks if he jumps in a pool just because his bones are so dense. But you're right. No, and like in any fight that we've seen Jan in over the past 4-ish years, since he got the title and has held all the fights recently, like he's either won or the person who beat him didn't make it look emphatic. I mean, putting aside Glover Teixeira, which is, an outlier in this case, even Alex, like freaking Pereira, didn't look great in winning over Jan Blachowicz. And that is, to your point, like he makes people fight his own fight. He's really defensively good, maybe even like, not underratedly, but maybe difficult to tell how defensively sound he is, which makes people fight him at his pace. And but again, I mean, this was an interesting fight for him because if he had won against Carlos Oldberg, either in the same way Oldberg beat him, which with those, I mean, there's another point to this, but those scorecards, could have been either way based on the way that fight went. Or if he had knocked him out, there really wouldn't have been much else for Jan to maybe do. But look at that title picture when you see that he drew with Ankalaev and he put the hardest fight on Alex Pereira at light heavyweight aside from Ankalaev. But again, that's not the way the fight went. So there are other things you're going to need to do with him.
Yeah. Marcus Muster makes a good point. Age 42 is up there. It's a historical comparison to Dan Henderson doing it at that age. And it's worth noting that, by the time Dan Henderson was 42, he had been on testosterone replacement therapy for like 5 years. And as soon as the UFC outlawed that, I think he fought like one more time and was done. But nonetheless, that's kind of what light heavyweight has become. Like Glover won the title after 40. Cormier, had the title like at least right around 40. Obviously, Blachowicz had the title at like age 38 or 39 or something. Light heavyweight is the new heavyweight in more ways than just one, I guess. Any other thoughts about this one before we move on?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'll be interested to see what Jan wants to do next. I mean, he's at this weird crossroad where, he took 2 years off, lost, kind of not weirdly, but, lost a close fight today. So we'll see, what's with what he wants to do. See how much longer he thinks he can keep it up.
Yeah. Third from the top here, Kevin Holland, Gunnar Nelson, two of the stranger guys in their own way in a division that is normally not a strange division. Kevin Holland, no explanation needed for why he's a strange case as a fighter. And then Gunnar Nelson, who fights so seldom that I always kind of forget how good he is until he gets back out there. This is another one where I did not pick the result right, but I do stand by my assessment, which, I mean, I said on the preview. At this point, anytime I catch myself thinking or about to say, as long as Kevin Holland fights to his best advantage, I need to stop and say the opposite of whatever I was about to say next. Kevin Holland likes to play with fire.
Yeah.
He likes to fuck around, and sometimes he finds out and sometimes he doesn't. Like, he's taking on someone in Gunnar Nelson who is older than him, fights once every 2 years, gives up ridiculous reach. Holland was younger, faster, while Gunnar is kind of a unique and competent striker, nowhere near the striker Kevin Holland is at this point. Yeah. The only thing Holland really needed to do is stay off the ground, and he can't help but make his fights more interesting than they need to be.
Right.
Like, only in a Kevin Holland Gunnar Nelson fight do you get Kevin Holland with a fully locked in omoplata and Nelson just standing up and swinging him around like a suitcase.
That was insane for like a minute into the fight. Yeah.
Yeah. SOS Rampages going for an omoplata on Gunnar Nelson is the most Holland thing I've ever seen. I mean, it is what you would expect from a guy that was like laughing and talking as Charriere was standing over him in his guard. Like, we're talking about Gunnar Nelson, a guy that, he's a Mundial's medalist at the brown belt level. He came this close to being an Abu Dhabi medalist. He came in fourth one year, and he came in fourth, like, on his way to coming in fourth. Like, who did he beat? Oh, he beat Jeff Munson, who's like this, 240 pound, like, world-class grappler. Like, Nelson is great on the ground. Kevin Holland played with fire. Okay. I still don't trust Kevin Holland as a possible contender in either weight class that he likes to fight in. Just, they're 170, like, the 185ers are too big and 170 is just too good. And Holland just still does kind of screw around. But having said that, he's definitely better at 170 than 185
by miles. Yeah.
Like, I think it was Dev who said in the Sherdog editorial Slack tonight that, like, Roman Dolidze probably walks around like 40 pounds heavier than Kevin Holland does. Like, there's no reason they should even be at risk of fighting each other.
Yeah.
And it's obvious because Bisping asked him when he wanted to fight again, and Holland said, he's like, at 170, maybe July would be good. 185 next weekend.
Right. No, I mean, it's true. Like, in that Roman Dolidze fight, like, similar build, it just looked like you had taken Kevin Holland and just expanded him 50% in every dimension. But yeah, I mean, Kevin Holland goes through this cycle, man. He's had what, like, almost 25 fights in the UFC over like the past 5 years or something like that. Maybe 20 fights in the UFC.
Exactly 20. This was his 25th. Yeah.
Jesus. It's insane. He's like the exact opposite of Gunnar Nelson, but he goes through this cycle, at least in the past couple of years, probably his last like 9 fights, where, he's matched at either 170, mainly 170. He's matched against someone who he just outclasses and beats fairly easily. Think of, Oleksiejczuk, Ponzinibbio, Chiesa, guys like that. Yeah. And then he fights the guys that are around the same skill level that he could beat, but for some reason he entertains their games and loses. MVP, or even Stephen Thompson to a degree. And then he, after going through that cycle a little bit and gaining some momentum, he then finally hits his ceiling, the JDMs and the, I guess, Hamzat to a degree, even though that was, some strange circumstances. And I kind of picked Holland going into this one, not super confidently, but just kind of rolling the dice on the it being the time where maybe he'll finally like, pick up one win out of his last, 5 fights, just so he can keep a little bit of momentum going. But no, he played Gunnar Nelson's game, and I was very worried the entire time. But that's just Kevin Holland for you, man.
I've heard some people compare Holland to like Neil Magny, but and that's not completely inaccurate, but I think it's just an easy comparison to make because they're both kind of like tall, skinny black dudes. I think of him more like the new Donald Cerrone, where you could tell the point at which Donald Cerrone gave up on being an actual top level contender and was just like, I want to fight 5 or 6 times a year. I want to win enough of those 5 or 6 that I can get good card placement and stay on roster. But besides that, I just want to, fight, get my purses, get some bonuses, and became kind of a folk hero along the way. That's Kevin Holland up and down. Like, I don't know if he would admit it, but he is sometimes open and frank enough that maybe he would, and would just say, like, I'm probably not a title contender in either weight class. I just want to fight as often as I can, entertain people, and make some money. I bet if you caught Kevin Holland in an unguarded moment, he would say that.
Yeah, and he gets flip flops where sometimes he is still like overconfident and strays away from that fact. But yeah, man, I mean, the Donald Cerrone comparison is great. I imagine by when it's all said and done, 5-6 years down the road, Kevin Holland's retiring. He might have the most fights in UFC history if he keeps at the pace he is.
Excuse me, Jim Miller will still be fighting then.
You're
right.
Like You're right. You're right. Fuck, I didn't even think about
that. I left Portia Baines's absolute Hall of Famer comment up there for as long as I could.
You do need to.
Here's another Hall of Fame comment. Kevin Holland, being Texan, knows him from some guns, and he apparently just wants to buy some elephant-ass guns that I don't know that I've seen a 45-70 in person. Like, I've shot one in like Fallout New Vegas.
Oh my God.
Any other thoughts on Kevin Holland playing with fire?
Nope. Can't wait to see him do it again next time.
All right. Before that, Molly Mccan. The UFC did its best. They tried to book her with Estela Nunes. Estela Nunes was 0-4 in the UFC, had gotten finished, I think, in 3 of them. It was the perfect setup to get Meatball Molly a sensational win in front of a London crowd, maybe get Paddy to carry her around on his shoulders or vice versa, pour beer on each other. The place comes unglued. Estela Nunes does not hold up her end of the deal. She gets injured. You know what? Just show up injured and go get your ass kicked. Do the Dillashaw. No. Instead, Alexia Thainara steps in, and I don't know if Alexia Thainara is a future contender at 115. I didn't learn that much about her from watching this fight with Mccan.
Yeah.
But at this point, it's a problem because, Mccan presented as a boxer, but her boxing was actually never that great. And her best weapon was probably her offensive wrestling and grappling, but her defensive wrestling and grappling remained bad enough that the UFC was just running into a spot where they couldn't find any winnable fights for her. Thainara ran over this woman. It was rough, man.
There's not much to say. Just damn. That
I mean, John Butterfield. I agree with this. If she did that to Molly Mccan, she can kind of skip the insert fighter name here's of the world. Like, as far as I'm concerned, Alexia Thainara does not need to fight anybody that's 500 or below in the UFC after this point. She doesn't have to go to ranked fighters, but she can skip straight to at least like the formerly ranked fighters who are on the outside looking in, maybe.
Right. She can skip the people that Mccan would have armbarred or spinning back fisted.
It's perfect. Yes, exactly. She can skip. I mean, that was a 125, but she can skip the Hannah Goldies of the 115-pound division. It's kind of a shame that she and Amanda Ribas are training partners, and Amanda Hebus' dad is basically her coach, because otherwise that's exactly the kind of person I'm talking about. Somebody
Right.
that's probably on the outside of the top 10 looking in, but is still like clearly a pretty damn good fighter.
Yeah.
The real loser here is Estela Nunes, who is now not getting a payday. Yeah, I completely agree. Or
Yeah.
as Garrett Clemens puts it so eloquently and so succinctly, the real loser is all of us. Because the nice thing about Thainara versus Mccan is at least we got a finish and it was over quick.
It was over quickly. Yes.
Um,
which we cannot say about some fights later down on this card.
Yeah, but the fight right before it ended in a finish.
Oh,
Jordan Vucenic versus Chris Duncan in a battle of former Cage Warriors champs. All right, Jordan Vucenic is still he's 0-2 in the UFC now.
Mm-hmm.
I've still not completely cut bait on this guy. I'm not sure whether he's better suited at featherweight or lightweight, but he's young. He has athletic gifts. He has some good tools. Like I'm not done with him yet, but having said that, Chris Duncan looked pretty damn good here, man. Like my problem with Duncan was always he's like he presents as a striker, but he's so slow for a lightweight. Like just his hand speed has looked so bad in his wins and losses. I was just thinking any top 20 lightweight is just going to light Duncan up, but he looked pretty sharp here. And then once things got to the ground,
I mean,
dominant.
All him. Yeah. And the comparisons were made, you know, about him training at American Top Team recently and sort of seemingly picking up some of these things from other lightweights training there. You know, his cage control and, you know, throwing knees into Vucenic's rib cage, oddly reminiscent of Gamrot versus Diego Ferreira. And then, of course, you know, latching up the guillotine to finish it. But I understand what you were saying with Vucenic. I mean, it's close. It's probably on, you know, strike 2 of 3. But he's not, you know, he's not off just yet. So yeah, we'll have to see if he can, you know, show us a little bit of the shine that he did in the Guram fight. Even though that also is,
as who was it that pointed it out?
It might have been Dev.
John Butterfield. Yeah, that did not age well. Yeah, clearly. Yeah, I mean, not much to say other than that. Chris Duncan looked real good. Jordan Vucenic still has not. He's not given any inkling of how good he looked in Cage Warriors against good fighters on his way into the UFC. He is young enough that, hell, if he loses one more, the UFC could cut him. He could come back in a year or two and be a whole different man, kind of like the Youssef Zalal phenomenon. Like it's not out of the realm of possibility. I'm choosing to see this more as a good step forward for Chris Duncan. I normally love it when fighters from kind of outside the U.S., you know, come up with a camp in their home country, their locality, and kind of stick with that for a long time. I just think it gives us a diversity of different approaches. It gives us fewer conflicts where, you know, these guys can't fight each other because they train together.
Exactly.
But Chris Duncan moving to ATT has been brilliant.
Yeah. I mean,
everything about his game looks better. Mike Brown is the man.
Yeah, for sure. And the commentator was saying that they may have had a bet about the loser getting the other's nickname tattooed on them. And since Vucenic lost, I think he may have to tattoo it on the bottom of his feet because
we're running out of room.
Yeah.
It's like a thermometer. Like once your tattoos get up to here, it's like, okay, I'm never gonna have a job that pays taxes. And then like once you get up to here, it's like I'm probably going to be a net drain on taxes, you know, like
yeah. And then once the bottom of your feet are there, it's just I don't know. you're off the deep end at that point.
Exactly. The main card opener, featherweight matchup between Nathaniel Wood and Morgan Charriere. Another couple of Cage Warrior standouts. Nathaniel Wood is another one that I was never that high on him before.
Mhm.
I always thought he's a guy that was going to turn into just another guy
Yep.
in the UFC. But at this point, I mean, I think he's like 10-3 in the UFC, but he's 5-1 since moving up to featherweight.
Mhm.
Moving up from bantamweight to featherweight has helped him. It's made him look faster. I mean, that's always the trade-off. You're not
Mhm.
physically overpowering, but you are relatively faster. He was faster than Morgan Charriere.
By
Like
a noticeable margin.
exactly. Just in
Yeah.
all of the close quarters, like all the boxing distance exchanges, he was lighting Charriere up.
Yeah.
He was landing first and third, like over and
Yes.
over again.
Yes. Yeah. Good. No, it looked like that. Relative to him would look like he was on like 1.25 speed or even 1.5 speed, like compared to Morgan. It's just he was just there to the punch, and I mean, in some of those grappling exchanges and in some of like just some of the engagements, you can tell Morgan had a physicality advantage, but it did not matter. I mean, Nathaniel Wood got to the punch more often, and any difference in power was made up for by just the landing at like 2 times clip that Morgan was.
Yeah, and it's not like Wood was like shooting water pistols out there. Like his punches were like snapping Charriere's head back. Just
Yeah.
He's got that kind of power that just comes from decent technique, sitting down in your punches, doesn't have to overswing. 145, maybe the hardest division in the UFC right now to break into the top 10. Just everybody in the top 10 is so experienced, so athletic, so well-rounded. So it's if you ever ask me if like fighter A is a future contender at 145, I'm probably just going to say no on general principle. But Wood looked more like a future contender to me tonight than he ever has in his UFC run.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's one of those things too, where, moving divisions and stuff like that, but also he's been plagued with a little bit of inactivity throughout his career over the past couple of years. And so you kind of,
he like missed most of a year because he ripped himself wide open on some exposed crown molding at his gym. Like, it's kind of ironic that his name is Wood and he got shelved for like 10 months by a piece of wood, but yeah.
And so it's difficult to sort of track that, but he did look great tonight, and I would be curious to see him. I'd been throwing names together. I mean, and I guess we'll probably talk about this should we reach the end of the show, talk about some bulls and bears and stuff like that. But this is the first fight that Morgan Charriere has lost convincingly in the UFC. His only other loss was Chepe, which is very close fight, very nip and tuck to
and Chepe has turned, and Chepe that's aged well. Chepe is becoming one of those guys that actually is breaking into the rankings. He's looked fantastic. So
maybe that's the fight. But probably bring up Morgan again later.
Before that, the top prelim, Jai Herbert, the Black Country Banger, versus Chris Taco Padilla.
The fight of the worst nicknames in UFC history. Not the worst, but
I mean, I've had to explain to a few people that his nickname, the Black Country, is the part of England he lives in, like the Midlands area where Birmingham and stuff is. It's called the Black Country because it's where the coal comes from. It is not that I am black and I'm from the country and I'm a banger.
You see,
and if it was, it wouldn't mean banger in the sense of like sausage either. Now that's turning into a porn name. No, Jai Herbert, the banger from the Black Country, versus Chris Padilla, the taco from Greater LA.
Dude, Jai Herbert's nickname sounds like what the concierge at the hotel tells me I streamed last night. Even though I'm trying to I'm trying to deny it. He's like, sir, you were charged $40 for Black Country Banger. It's like, I have no clue what you're talking about, man. But yeah, this was okay. Yeah, please continue.
Well, all I'm going to say about this is, on the preview, I kind of asked rhetorically, is Jai Herbert the best fighter who's under 500 in the UFC? Because he was 3-4-1 in the UFC coming into this fight. He's now 3-5-1 in the UFC. But his losses were like Moicano, Topuria, Fares Zayam. He had a draw with Ludovic Klein. Like, none of them were bad, but at some point, especially in the weight classes from 135 to 170, you are what your record says you are. And at this point, Jai Herbert, I guess he's a 36-year-old lightweight who has good physical tools and has good skills, but loses to all the people he should lose to and some of the people he shouldn't lose to. And that's just a tough thing to be in these divisions.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in hearing what you think of Chris Padilla, because he kind of came out of nowhere. He came out of again, Southern California. He came out of UNF, Up Next Fighting, which is, I mean, it is one of the more impressive, newer, growing promotions in Southern California. But he came to the UFC with like no real fanfare, and he's now 3-0. Like, is he actually any good, or is he just run into the right guys?
Hard to tell. I mean, at the very least, we know he's better-ish than Jai Herbert, but worse than Ilia Topuria. So, you know, there's a range, but it'll be interesting to see. I mean, it's like you said, like we've been saying, like this is 155. Like it is a dog eat dog world, a dog eat dog division. And I mean, nothing so far has shown me that he is anything more than just another lightweight. But I think he has a wealth of potential to show that. You know, he's won 2 fights. He's won his 2 fights in the UFC so far. You know, I think he'll have opportunities, and he could definitely stand to impress. One thing I did write down was the fact that in the last few flurries of the fight, you know, Jai Herbert cut Padilla, and I thought Herbert had won. I think I actually scored it for Herbert. Yeah, I gave him the last 2 rounds, and so in my head, I'm thinking, damn, it sucks to not only lose this fight, but also, you know, in a fight where you were relatively undamaged the entire way through, to get sliced open like that in the last 15 seconds, have to come back to the States and get like a $3,000 stitch on it. But he gets to walk away with his win money, so makes that a little less painful.
If he's smart, he'll get it stitched up there in England,
right?
You know, with the single payer system, and then you know, slap some super glue on it, and then hop on that plane. Yeah, I guess it was worth mentioning that it was a close ass fight. MMA Decisions had 8 media scores, and it was dead even split between Padilla and Herbert. So close fight, but you know what, Herbert keeps losing close fights.
He keeps losing close fights. Yeah.
Before that, the guy that, to hear the desk talk about it, is the new young hope of UK MMA, Mr. Lonnie Kavanagh, took on Felipe dos Santos in a match of, I think they're both really good flyweights, actually. Kind of excited to have both these guys in the division. And I liked that Felipe dos Santos kind of came right out and put it on Kavanagh a little bit.
Yeah,
because
100%.
Especially coming up, Kavanagh was just so much more athletic, aggressive, physical than his opponents. Like a lot of his opponents, whether the fight was 10 seconds long or 10 minutes long, just he didn't really have to deal with much resistance coming the other way. It was kind of interesting to see him put on his heels and have to adjust to that, take a little bit of punishment, get yelled at by his corner between rounds, and make adjustments. So even though he didn't blow dos Santos out of his sneakers, I thought this was kind of an important fight for him. It made me feel about him like I felt about Josh Van a couple fights ago, where I'm like, all right, I need this guy to show me he can win a fight when he is the more skilled fighter, but the other guy's tough enough that he's not just going to be destroyed in 2 minutes.
100%.
He is past that test, and this was an important part, I think, of Lonnie Kavanagh doing the same.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. I think of the checklists of, you know, young prospects, one of them is that being able to adjust under the pressure, because, you know, they'll come in, they'll be skilled, they'll have shine, they'll run through everybody. But being able to this early on drop around to Felipe dos Santos, he's coming at you like a fucking bat out of hell. And then to come back from that, you know, super good sign to see. And I think he could be, you know, really interesting in this division. I mean, we lost our resident British flyweight in Muhammad Makayev, and maybe Lonnie here is a more entertaining and less pissing off, less problematic fixture of the flyweight division. And man, I mean, just to express it, but these guys like put it on, and like this was a hell of a fight. It was probably the one North Star in this sea of otherwise okay fights. And yeah, those guys were covered in blood. I mean, Felipe dos Santos hits that spinning elbow over the top of his head, and you know me as a guy who's cracked my head open several times. Those things bleed like a lot. And
They do. Like it. I don't gross out very easily. I mean, I
no,
watch this
right.
stuff every week for the last, for longer than you've been alive. But when they were clinched, I think early in the second round, and Kavanagh was bleeding so badly that there was just a trail of blood just running straight down the middle of Dos Santos's spine, just like some horror movie shit. I'm like, oof.
Yeah, and what gets me is saying, I think it was Dos Santos, either pulling guard or being on the bottom, tries to pull a guillotine, and you just visibly see under his forearm, blood pools and it just slips off of Lonnie's neck, up to his head. It's just stuff like that where it's really, you see the effect that being covered in maybe a pint of blood will do to you.
Marcus Buster raises an interesting point. At some point, could Felipe dos Santos end up at bantamweight? Certainly, if his forehead keeps getting larger, he might be forced up to 135. I think I said ahead of one of his last fights. If his hairline ever starts receding, he's going to start picking up Wi-Fi with that thing.
He does have a long head.
But two outstanding flyweights. We're lucky to have them.
Yeah.
That's the good news. The bad news is that we now have to talk about Marcin Tybura versus Mccan.
Yeah, this fight woke me up from the coma of what we're about to talk about.
All right. Okay, I'm gonna throw something out here. I understand that the play-by-play and color commentators for a promotion, their job is not just to tell you what's happening, but to sell you what's happening. It's their job to inflate the importance and the entertainment value of the fights that you're watching. So most of that I take it with a grain of salt, but those guys are doing their job. But the way the UFC's talking heads talk about Mccan just seems so divorced from reality that I've never quite understood it. I don't know if it's a great white hope type thing, a great British hope type thing, but I can't remember whether I said this on the preview, but I'm like, he's a solid boxer with below average power for a heavyweight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is he just deluxe Chase Sherman with an accent? I mean, he's
deluxe Chase Sherman out of him. Discount Tom Aspinall. Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't seen anything out of him other than the fact that he had been undefeated until tonight. Made me think he was more than just another dude in this division. He was 4-0 in the UFC coming into this, but 4-0 against pretty much the bottom of what the division had to offer. I think 3 of the 4 people he's beaten are gone. Lucas Dresky. Are gone. But
yeah.
Dude, Marcin Tybura is, I won't say he's the gift that keeps on giving, but there have been a few people who have made it look easy against Marcin Tybura, but they are few and far between, man.
Yeah.
He remains a huge dude who's definitely well-rounded, he doesn't look athletic, but deceptively athletic. Yeah. Even as he's 39 years old, pushing 40. Yeah. More than able to keep up with people a decade younger than him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think what you're getting at there before about the talk around Mccan, I think a lot of that was due to his 10-0. And even if regardless of how he looks in those fights or who he's fighting, the fact that it's there, gives them the selling point. They just hope that the undefeated record will stay and he'll get better at some point and live up to that undefeated record. Now that that's gone, I don't know. I mean, we might not hear much about old Mccan.
Comically large noggin should be his official nickname. Get Bruce Buffer saying that, except he would pronounce it wrong. It'd be like comically large noggin. Yeah.
Fighting out of.
Yeah, exactly.
He did not get and I guess we haven't talked about the second fight yet, but you threw out there that he might get the 2 Duncans mixed up. And luckily he was able to get through that at the very least.
Yeah. Might as well move on to that. The other Duncan, Christian Leroy Duncan against Andre Pulyaev. This was about as cynical an attempt to get a promising but limited local favorite a win as Estela Nunes versus Molly Mccan was. Like Puliaev, a fellow kickboxer without fight-ending power, who's probably worse at everything than Duncan. Like that's pretty much it. For about a minute, I thought Duncan was going to put on his best performance in the UFC so far. I mean, he came out with aggression, started lighting Puliaev up immediately.
And 14 more minutes go by.
Yeah, really. Ninja Kitty, Andre Puliaev looked like Caleb Starnes running away all fight. Cut the guy. Yeah, that's a good point. It's worth mentioning that Duncan has to work with what he's being given. And after about the first 4 minutes, Puliaev didn't seem to really want much of this. I used to make the joke that, Tybura is so nonviolent that like they don't even let him back into Poland after his fights. I don't know if Alexander Shlemenko, Shlemenko might make Puliaev sit in a different section on the plane back to Russia, because, well, dude, he is the
right.
Puliaev is the protege of a guy who's your size and was like throwing like spinning haymakers on light heavyweights.
A living Beyblade, yeah.
Exactly, living Beyblade is the perfect way to describe Alexander Shlemenko. And Puliaev, yeah, it was not good. But Duncan survives, advances. He's now 4-2 in the UFC. Here's the nice thing about 185. It's a wide open division, but it's not wide open in a way that if Duncan wins one more fight, the UFC is going to have no choice but to put him in against like a top 10 guy. He's going to get time to develop, and 185 is wide open enough that he's also not in danger of being cut if he loses his next fight. I don't think he's young. He is exciting in bursts, and he's probably still developing.
And he's British. So
British.
It
matters.
It matters. Man, these London cards, man, just feels like when you have like kids, you're like you have young kids at home, and like you don't let them have all their toys at once. You kind of cycle through them, and so like once like every few months, you just like open up the box, like you swap out the boxes of toys. You're like, oh, I forgot about these ones, and it's just a bunch of London fighters who fight once a year here.
Exactly. Okay, we've delayed long enough. It is now time. Sean fucking Sheehan is the man for the. I can't imagine anybody watching this doesn't know, but Sean Sheehan is the warhorse of the Sherdog Radio Network. He does previews for basically every promotion but the UFC. Like, he's our guy on PFL, he's our guy on Cage Warriors, Octagon, KSW. He does our weekly betting show where he just does his best 5 picks of the week. And his best 5 picks of the week are always, 4 actual picks and then like 1 flyer. And the flyer is expressly a money line or a prop that I've never seen him do a flyer that was like less than like plus 400 or plus 500. And his regular picks are actually very reliable. He's one of the better guys out there, but his flyers are famously terrible. Like I think he was coming in on a streak of like 9 or 10 straight weeks of the flyer not hitting. And this week he was like, my flyer this week is plus 1,200, and I guarantee you it's going to cash. And it was Shauna Bannon by submission.
Wow.
Sean fucking Sheehan.
Wow. Fucking. What a guy. And I mean, that was not a surefire thing during this fight. I mean, it happened, but man, like. Shauna Bannon by submission. Wow. Did he say anything about it after it happened? You get any messages from him?
I mean, it was an all hands on deck night for us. Like I wrote the text recaps for Sherdog, so I was just working furiously. But I am given to understand that he may have taken a victory lap on Twitter after that happened, and
as
more
he should.
power to him.
As he should,
dude. Here's the thing.
That's an insane call out.
Shauna Bannon is a great story. I've Sean's interviewed her. She's a great story, but I think she's at best kind of like a marginal 115 pounder in the UFC. Keith disagrees with me, but I think Puja Tomar sucks. So
He
the
did pick her
best
to
thing
win.
either of these women had to offer us on the UFC level was something as memorable as this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
for Shauna Bannon to get head kicked by a woman that can't ride the big roller coasters, and then 15 seconds later to triangle her is just, that's pretty much the best thing ever.
Dude, like I'm watching this fight, man, and I just remember, like, I think about my little brother's little league team, bunch of 8-year-olds playing baseball, and something about 8-year-olds playing baseball is so fucking entertaining because they're not good at it. And I think I sometimes look at fights like Shauna Bannon versus Puja Tamar in the same way, because when they're not, shit happens when there's like this level of quality. Like, just like you will get head kicked by a 5'2" woman, and then you will armbar her in the same 30-second span. And that happened today. And wow. Yeah, I know Keith got that wrong. That was kind of a throw out, but he was, I mean, I don't know if he tuned into the fights at all, but he must have been happy for about 15 seconds there before it all came crashing down.
It's so good. Sean Sheehan, hero of the week.
He's the man. He's that guy.
We're getting down to the bottom, the nitty gritty. Now that Molly is gone, who was there in the UFC that Puja could beat? Mccan. I know that she could block Mccan's jump shot. I don't know if she could beat her in a fight. Second from the bottom, Nathan Fletcher versus Kalen Loughran, England versus Ireland, tough versus tough. Two guys that fought each other on the amateur circuit. And, well, I mean, Loughran got split decision vengeance. Mm-hmm. If you're in the chat, how did you score this fight if you were even watching it? Kalen Loughran, Nate Fletcher, because I'm looking at the media scores, and it is 9 for Fletcher, 1 for Loughran. One of the 9 for Fletcher is me. I thought it was a pretty straightforward 29-28 decision. Like, here's the thing. Like, yeah, I'm not that incensed about it. It was a close fight. Either guy could have taken charge of it if they really wanted to. But for me, it's just weird because I didn't think any of the 3 rounds were individually that hard to score. I thought Kalen Loughran won the first round. I thought Fletcher won the second and third.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you there.
I'm actually glad that Loughran won because I still think he's a very limited fighter. Mm-hmm. And at bantamweight, I don't think he's gonna get within shouting distance of, like, the rankings there.
Yeah.
But I think his fights have been fun. He's a fun guy to have around. So if the upside of winning a slightly undeserved split decision is that he gets at least 2 more fights in the UFC, more power to him. Because here's the thing. He's now 2-2 in the UFC. That almost certainly means that he just finished up his first 4-fight deal. This pretty much guarantees he's going to get another one. So they probably won't cut him unless he loses his next 2 fights. So good for him.
Power to the man.
Meanwhile, Fletcher is now 1-1 in the UFC. So he's probably fine unless he loses his next 2 as well. I'll never say no harm, no foul about a bad decision, but
as far as bad decisions go, this one's not the worst.
Yeah. Loughran and Wood had good post-fight speeches, inspiring
yes, they did.
People to get doing their best. I should have said, thank you, Marcus. I should have said something about this way up on the main card when we were talking about Wood. Huge shout out for anybody, especially fighters in the MMA space that talk frankly about stuff like mental health. Like, it's all, nobody cares if I talk about mental health, because if you're watching this right now, you probably assume I'm a sis and you can kick my ass. But looking at people that are physically tough for a living and just admitting that, hey, it's okay not to be okay sometimes, important.
Yeah, very important.
Opening fight of the card, Guram Kataladze versus Kawe Fernandez. I hesitate. I say I hesitate, but then I don't really hesitate. I keep doing it. When fighters from the CIS, and when I say CIS, Federation of
the Confederacy of Independent Systems, naturally.
Yeah. Former Soviet republics, if you're my age. When they come over to the UFC and mysteriously become less well-conditioned, less strong, and less fast after about 4 fights. I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire, and when that fire is burning is pretty much meldonium and Turinabol. Cowboy Fernandez, I mean, he's a baby-faced guy, whereas Kataladze looks 10 years older than he is, but Fernandez physically fought like a guy who's 15 years younger. He just seemed smoother, faster, just as strong. Kataladze is fading fast.
Yeah.
And it's
he's
a bummer.
in the Bruno Silva or there's a billion examples you could list. Yeah, continue.
Yes. No, I mean, that's pretty much what I had to say. Kataladze came in as a greater than 4-1 favorite. And I mean, I picked him. I saw some upset value, but if the upset was going to happen, I was assuming that it was just going to be Fernandez clipping him with something big because he hits super hard. He's aggressive. I didn't expect Fernandez to just be first to the punch and sharper and more on the ball throughout the fight. Like that's what's more concerning. Like if he just decks Kataladze, that'd be one thing. But yeah, Fernandez looked good. Kataladze looked bad.
And it's interesting, what you're saying with good Gurum's decline. I can say his last name, I just can't say it like in stride. And I was just gonna say, Deb, his corner team was insane. I remember
his corner team was everybody that we just said should be next in line for a welterweight title shot. I think.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments, and this is like right when I'm first getting on, but like somewhere in the third round, I think Fernandez puts down Kutaladze with like a takedown or a trip or something like that, and you just see Ilia Topuria like put his face in his hands. It just looked the most disappointed like dad ever. But no, I mean, Gurum's been riding this split decision over Gamrot, and he's now 2-3 in the UFC, which is kind of crazy to see. And I mean, all of his fights have been against good fighters. But
yes,
there was this like he seemed to be this like underrated kind of like flying maybe low, but everyone respected his game kind of fighter. But Cowboy Fernandez put a hell of a beating on him.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And that is all 13 fights from UFC London broken down. Let's get to the fun stuff. I assume they handed out some bonuses tonight, deserved or not. Let's see what they were.
Yeah,
if you're listening right now, I assume you already know what the bonuses are. So instead of guessing, just lay out whom you would have given the bonuses to. I will say that there was no fight of the night tonight. There were 4 performances of the night, and
4 performances.
4 performances of the night. I am okay with one of them. I am okay with 2 of them. I am okay with 3 of them. I am looking kind of side eye at one of them. So
I'm no fight of the night. I mean, 2 of those performances of the night better be for both sides of Felipe and Lanier, because that's kind of interesting to me. I mean, Brady definitely got a performance bonus. I imagine at least Kavanagh got one if that's all that happened in that fight, which is strange because I think that of any fight on this card that deserves a fight of the night bonus. Did Bannon get her spray tan budget for the next 2 years?
Bannon has guaranteed that she will be able to look like a rotisserie chicken for the next 2 years.
One thing I wrote down next to the Vucenic fight was just a question. It was like, what weighs more, Vucenic's tattoos or Shauna Bannon's spray tan? Like if you jarred both of them like in liquid form, like what would outweigh the other?
If you jarred both of them in liquid form, I would be sick to my stomach. So your performance bonus winners were Sean Brady for his, and I love this because he got a fantastic finish, but where these bonuses are often really finish of the night bonuses, this was a performance of the night. He looked incredibly good. Alexia Thainara for ruining Molly McCann's evening.
Really?
Picked up 50,000.
That's insane.
So we're talking about somebody in Alexia Thainara who my guess would be her entire career earnings were under $20,000 leading into this.
Yeah.
And she just made probably $70,000 tonight. Like,
Yeah.
I bet the UFC signed her to a 10 and 10. So she made $20,000 and then $50,000 for the submission.
Insane. Because she was only like 11-1 now. She's only had like 12 pro fights fighting in like regional promotions. Yeah, probably has not made any
under
money.
$20,000. Under $20,000, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Shauna Bannon.
Good for her. Good for her.
As we mentioned. Your final one was Kevin Holland.
Huh.
I don't get that at all. Like,
I mean, no. I mean, like it was like he won, like, but it was a Kevin Holland. It was just I don't understand not giving that to Kavanagh and Felipe dos Santos. I don't get that.
No, here's the thing. It was a better fight than it was a performance. Like, if they gave Holland and Nelson the fight of the night, I'd be like,
yeah, that'd be one thing.
I mean, I rolled my eyes a little bit, but it was a lot of fun. But it was more fun than it needed to be because it wasn't a great performance by Holland. Like,
exactly. And I mean, and I know we talk about this sometimes, but like, I think Kevin Holland might be maybe the fighter on this card with the most money. If we're not counting, I mean, maybe Leon, but like him and Leon might be the two fighters.
I bet it's Jan.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, former champ.
Jan's
a lot of fights in the UFC.
Jan's had multiple title fights, multiple headliners. He's like going on 25 fights in the UFC, and he was a former champ from KSW when he came to the UFC, so he probably wasn't signed to like a 12-12. Yeah, I bet Blachowicz has made the most purses.
But with that, I mean, like we talk about this every time, but like I think Kavanagh and Felipe dos Santos paid the blood price for $50,000. So it's unfortunate, but I agree with the first three. I mean, I think those all shake out, especially Brady's. I mean, like just had a baby too, so congrats to him.
There you go. Those are the bonuses. Shall we get to the fun stuff?
Yeah.
I suppose we ought to have a cut list of some sort. For those, if anybody is watching us for the first time, I'm sorry, but the cut list, it's got to happen. The Contender Series signs 30 or 40 or 50 new fighters every season. Somebody's got to make room for them. Somebody's got to go. It's the circle of life. Is there anybody that you would cut after tonight, Adam?
That is a great question. And I one, maybe two.
All right, let me know who they are, and we'll see if I agree with you.
I mean, but even these, it's like Puliev. Sorry, was it make him 0-2 in the UFC? Losing to
0-1. He was just
0-1. Okay,
okay.
So then maybe never mind. Actually, I was misremembering. Puja Thainara is now 0-2.
1-1. No, she's 1-1.
Oh, well.
But she's 1-1 because she got an iffy splitter last June against Rayani Amanda. I mean, I'd be fine cutting her, but like I already feel like I'm unnecessarily mean to her. Like,
you can take your jabs, but don't take her job. What do you think? Because I don't know if I have anyone, but maybe something you say will.
No, I did not have anybody on my cut list after this one. That is the upside of having so many either brand new fighters or Contender Series fighters still on their first contract. I didn't actually have anybody to cut this time. I was going to give Thainara another chance because here's the thing: as much as I make fun of her, like she also came really close to icing Shauna Bannon, and probably being the MVP of the night.
Yeah,
if she'd landed 2 or 3 hammer fists a little more squarely, she would have been the only knockout tonight. Would have been guaranteed a bonus pretty much.
There wasn't a single knockout tonight, was there?
Sure wasn't.
I knew I was like feeling something. Like I was like, man, I feel really. That's insane. Keith really knows how to pick them. He really knows how to pick the ones he's not on for.
Yeah, smart man. Bobby Boucher, Ty Burr is going to get released and it'll be sad. Again, it'll be sad just because he'll end up like stranded in an airport like that one movie with Tom Hanks. Because again, they won't let him back into KSW until he either knocks somebody out or grows some eyebrows.
And he'll just be walking around like, oh, dude, Ty Burr is actually one of the most hilarious fighters, unintentionally hilarious fighters.
He is. Like, I have nothing against him. Like, I'm glad he's done this thing for as long as he has. Yeah, that's it for that. Bulls and Bears.
Bulls and Bears.
Do you want to go negative or positive?
Let's go negative, just because. Let's go negative. Bulls and the Bears was kind of weird, this card. I feel like nobody had large shifts in momentum aside from one, maybe two, like big outliers. Like you had the people that were set up to either bull or bear really hard, and they did either direction, but just not in like an insane degree. So I was talking about the Bears first. I mean, the outlier bear for me, or the highest bear for me, is going to be Leon Edwards. I mean, fairly simple in my mind. You know, first loss that wasn't in a title fight for a while. That's a big one. And then, I mean, it kind of drops off from there in terms of how badly some of these people bared. But I'm looking at Morgan Charriere. Totally fucked up that last name, but for the same reason I explained earlier, where, you know, this is the first loss he's got in the UFC that was pretty definitive. And obviously he's only fought, was his fourth or fifth fight in the UFC. I think he's 3-2. Oh, fourth.
No,
okay,
he's 2-2. He's 2-2 now. Yeah.
Okay, and so it'll remain to be seen if like it's followed up by more convincing losses. But at the very least, this is the first time, and so, you know, no real wiggle room or excuse there. And then third was either Vucenic or Parkin for my Bears. Just, you know, lost an O. Vucenic, you know, big favorite, lost as well. But what do you got?
I completely agree with those, so I won't pile three more full ones on there. I will address this one from John Butterfield. Cage Warriors, I can see both sides here, because one, yes, there are 3 consecutive losers on Tapology's Fight Night page, like holding Cage Warriors belts over their shoulders, but on the flip side, there's nobody from any other regional promotion that can say that, win or lose. Like, there were 7 Cage Warriors champs in the cage tonight, including one fight where it was one against another, so at least one had to lose. Yeah. Like, I still think of Cage Warriors as kind of one of the big 3 of European MMA, along with KSW, and all of a sudden now Octagon. This is just exploding. But yeah, rough night for Cage Warriors nonetheless. I'll throw Mick Parkin in there. Anytime you take your first loss, it has to be a stock down moment. We've talked a million times on here about how differently you are seen as a fighter if you're undefeated.
Yep.
Like, just the difference between the way people think of Khabib Nurmagomedov versus the way they thought of Alex Volkanovski, like before his first UFC loss, where he had like 20 wins in a row. He had a couple meaningless losses at welterweight in a ring that had no bearing on the fighter he is now. But one guy is, he's one of the greatest fighters of all time, and he's one of the greatest featherweights of all time.
Or even look at Islam right now, who has that one next to his number.
Parkin will end up fighting Tafa on the main card of an Australian pay-per-view for some reason.
It's miserable.
Like, well, there'll be a reason. It's if they get both those guys in the cage at the same time, will it affect gravity to the point that toilets start flushing the other way, like the right way down in Australia? And if those two guys fight, you might as well have the toilets getting ready to flush. But I agree with the call of Jordan Vucenic. I'm not sure what I predicted for when he got signed to the UFC, but I definitely didn't predict that he would be in danger of losing his job after 2 fights. I still think his best work is ahead of him, but it's on him to prove that now.
What about your
Bulls?
Yeah, give me your Bulls. Give me
Bulls.
Give me what was good.
I don't normally go for the main event participants for the Bulls or the Bears just because the stakes are kind of obvious, but Sean Brady, like, to not just win the biggest fight of your career on a pretty big stage, you know, O2 Arena, and to check as many boxes as he did. Like, when you think about it, it's actually kind of rare for a fighter to noticeably improve once they're already a top 15-ish fighter.
Yeah.
Like improve radically, like where something that was a weakness becomes a strength. Like the example I will always go to for this is Charles Oliveira, where the story on him early on was he's an incredibly talented fighter, but he's the ultimate glass cannon. It's not just that he can't take a punch, like he just wilts.
Yeah.
And he went from that to being this absolute savage that just takes the best that people like Justin Gaethje and Michael Chandler can throw at him and comes back and just gives it to him worse. He became nasty.
Yeah.
Sean Brady going from a guy with an iffy gas tank to someone who just steamrolls a 5-round veteran like Leon Edwards.
Yeah.
That's impressive stuff. So he is definitely a bull. Big bull is going to be Chris Duncan. On a card where I feel like I can sign half of the fighters, even the winning fighters, to being just another guy. He's kind of threatening to become something other than just another guy. And sometimes it is a change of camp that does that. So if it's the ATT move that does that for Chris Duncan, then more power to him. Last one I'll throw out there. Shauna Bannon.
Shauna motherfucking Bannon.
Wins are going to be few and far between for her. Like well, she hangs her hat on her striking. She comes from like a family that has been competition, like I think Taekwondo people for years and years. It's kind of like the Dakota Ditcheva thing, the Stephen Thompson thing, where like grew up in her family's dojo. But having said that, she spent a lot of this fight hopping towards Puja Tomar on her back foot and flicking out the front foot like a 10-year-old in Taekwondo class. Wins are going to be few and far between with that approach. So for her to get this one,
fair enough. Fair.
Bulls.
Yep. Yeah, that's pretty much everything I had as well for my bulls. Like I said, like those two were great. Any other ones I have, they were bulls in the sense that, they improved their stock through their fight, but just not in the way they should have.
Tekken 2 through 5 references get you on the screen every time.
Wow, that's a deep cut right there. That's a deep cut. Oh man, I played Tekkens 2 through 4. Oh man, that was one of the first games I ever played on the PS2. Tekken 2 with my brother. Insane.
All right. That's it for the Bulls, the Bears. We're down to the last couple things. Give this card a letter grade.
Letter grade. B-. And the reason I say B- is because I feel like the teacher at the end of the semester who has a student who's got like a 79, who's got like a C, and the weather's nice. Like I said, they caught them in a good mood, and they're like, just fucking take the 0.01 points. B-, the lowest possible B. Not a bad time. It's always improved by getting to be on the show and talking to everybody. Fights itself, though, I mean, we had 2 really entertaining fights and 4 or 5 decent ones, and then we had Mick Parkin and Ty Burrow.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think a B-, and like I said, if it was 2 a.m. right now, this would be a C-.
Yeah.
It's just literally, okay, this was an okay card, a lot of draggy decisions, but a few eye-opening finishes, and I learned a lot about a few fighters, and it's 8:00 Central Time right now.
Yeah.
Like, my wife is still awake. I'm not dead tired.
That's really it. That's really
good day to be me.
Because I'm in the Keith time zone, and honestly, I am extremely impressed by how he does it. Because the shows where I've been here until 2 a.m., I'm like, fuck, just get me out of here.
he drinks energy drinks at such an alarming rate that I don't know whether it would be more expensive to insure his heart or his kidneys. That's how he does it.
Fucking, that's Keith for you, man.
Yeah. Your listener of the night. It's a crowded field because, interestingly, it's always a little bit of an attenuated crowd with an earlier card. We end up with more people that are willing to stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning, but it's our homies on these early cards. It is the people that have been here pretty much since the beginning, you know, and even the newer people like I'm in report that like at this point have been regulars, I think, for like at least a year.
Mhm.
I can't. I know this is a cop out, but I can't even give a listener of the night because pretty much everybody I would give it to, I've already told that you're not allowed to win anymore. You know, like
it's a
Marcus
small circle.
Mustard, Bobby Boucher, I'm in report, Ninja Kitty,
Porsche.
yeah, Porsche's not allowed. Like Porsche's only even allowed into these chats, like, you know, before we switch over to bar service at 9:00.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm allowed to give it out, and I may just have to go with Porsche just for giving us the word of the day, Blobulous, when referring to a potential fight between Tafa and Barkin.
Yeah, see, like that's when Keith says slapping titties, she says globulous. That's like slapping titties with like a GED. Like it just classes it up a little bit. Guys, that is it for the Sherdog After the Bell live recap for UFC London. I've been Ben. He has been the man, Mr. Adam Duffy. Watch out for the preview. It's going to be a weird preview. The next card coming up is the
UFC Mexico.
Yeah, it's Moreno versus Urseg. It's UFC Mexico City, but it's going to be a weird preview because Keith and I are going to have to record it separately, so there won't be any back and forth. I'll introduce the fights. Keith will put in his pick. I'll put in my pick, but just if it seems like a little more stilted than usual, that's why. So, but nonetheless, look out for that on Monday. And thank you all for listening. Thank you for participating. You are our people. We love you. Have a good night.
Thank you, guys. Great to be here.